New Thought Essays by Charles Brodie Patterson, published in 1898. The first section I'm going to read today is called The Imaging Faculty. The Imaging Faculty. The limitations of mind may be more clearly defined than is generally supposed. Mind is an outgrowth of the soul, as the body is an outgrowth of mind. Mind is that aspect of being that relates man to the world of form. In every phase of action, it deals with form, so that every thought conceived by man images itself in his mind. Chief then among all the mental faculties is this power to image or imagine, and it may truly be said that every thought we think contains within itself a picture. And further, that these thought pictures affect the body, either for health and strength or for sickness and disease. We are acted upon in two ways, by the force of life within and by the forms of life without. Hence, it may be said that man lives in two worlds. Besides the material consciousness of life, there is also a spiritual consciousness. There is something within man which transcends his sense nature and even his intellectual and reasoning powers. Something that reaches far deeper into the inner consciousness of life, which we might denominate the intuitive spiritual nature. It was to that something that the Apostle Paul referred when he said, "For the word of God is quick and powerful, and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing asunder of soul and spirit, and of the joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart." Hebrews 4:12. This is the word of God that is trying to make itself felt in the lives of men, the word that became fully manifested in the life of Jesus the Christ. As man listens to the voice of the higher coming from this inner consciousness of life, he has a sense of being related to everything. This inner feeling makes him desirous of doing good to all. It has the effect of causing him to see things in their true relations, so that his mind becomes filled with the harmonies of life, and in turn, the thoughts pictured in mind produce harmony and strength of body. The abstract qualities of faith, hope, and love, while unpicturable in and of themselves, have yet the effect of becoming associated with the forms of life, so that the mind, being acted upon by these invisible impulses of being, images only things harmonious and beautiful. Then again, there is the action on the mind from the world without. We find that here the unity of life is lost sight of, and the mind of man, having many things of seemingly opposite natures to contend with, questions the good and evil of these varying conditions. Many of these states produce in the mind feelings of resentment, avarice, anger, hate, etc. In fact, all the evil emotions that affect the mind come from seeing things in wrong relationship to one another. They all come from the outer world, from things that seem discordant. Now, the external world is not to be viewed as evil. Nothing is evil in and of itself. Evil is the result of the false imaginings we indulge in. It is our partial way of considering things. It is a reversal of the true method of thinking, which works from the inner outward. All the different mental conditions emanate from the imaging faculty, and by its proper control and direction, we may achieve results in every way beneficial. In its true development, we will find certain processes to be of great assistance. If we form the mental image after the true impulse, which enters the mind from the soul, the picture will be more nearly perfect than that which should come solely from external surroundings. Love for things pure and beautiful is first an inner state, but this will inevitably find its perfect correspondence in the world without. This applies both to persons and things. The abstract must associate itself with the concrete, but the abstract exists first. It would not be possible to convey by any mental image the idea of love to a mind that never felt its influence. Neither could we make known the qualities of faith and hope through word pictures to a mind that never felt them. These are soul feelings which transcend all mental action. Two words may be used to express states of consciousness and act in very different ways upon the imaging faculty. These words are impulse and emotion. The former is used in a sense that refers to such qualities as faith, hope, and love, or that which enters the mind from the soul. The latter is that something produced by outward causes, persons, or environment. It is noticeable that the most sublime and exalted human feelings are not the result of outside influences, but proceed from impulses within the soul. On the other hand, the lowest and most degraded sentiment is attributable either to other persons or to external conditions. Take, for instance, the action of a true impulse on the heart. It causes the blood to circulate more evenly and vigorously throughout the whole system. Where the circulation is imperfect, it proves that the emotions rather than the impulses are the mental directing forces. Emotions are caused by selfishness. They are of a personal character. Impulses are caused by the higher nature of man and are of a universal character. Consider the action of emotions on the stomach. This organ is affected by everything in the outer world, and especially by our environment and the people with whom we associate. Thus, when the mind becomes filled with bitterness toward persons or conditions, we find the physical expression of acidity in the stomach. Consider also the action of faith and trust on the liver and spleen. It renders their functions normally active, while worry and anxiety, which are emotions proceeding from external causes, always occasion the reverse. A majority of people attribute biliousness and other so-called liver troubles to improper food and drink, asserting that there is a reflex action upon the mind that produces despondency and gloom. But it is really immaterial what a man eats or drinks. He is superior to all exterior conditions. Relieve the mind of a bilious person from anxiety and worry, and fill it with hope and trust. Let his surroundings and actions be bright and cheerful, and a healthful physical condition will result. It may be difficult at first to bring this about, but persistency until the habit is formed will soon cause the mind to become related to all other hopeful minds, and in the end, it will be easier to continue in the new mental conditions than to revert to the old. The spiritual consciousness, as already said, imparts the thought of the unity of life. The spiritual consciousness, as already said, imparts the thought of the unity of life, that all force and all intelligence are one, and therefore that every form must necessarily be an expression of the inner force. Thus, we should carry the thought of unity into the outer world and see things in their true proportions, by reasoning from cause to effect. Material consciousness of life, losing sight of the whole and dealing with everything in part, sees nothing but diversity. All sense of proportion is lost, and the personal self becomes the greater. The things that gratify and seemingly do good to the personality are looked upon as the good things of life, while whatever thwarts or interferes with personal desire is regarded as evil, and all such outer evils become states of consciousness that are imaged or pictured in mind. Every thought we think, then, whether it be true or false, as imaged in mind, must be expressed on the body. Health and happiness come from an imagination directed and controlled by the highest that is within man, while mental discord and physical disease are the resultants of an untrained and uncontrolled imagination. Imagination rules the world, said Napoleon, but we must remember that the world for each and all of us to rule is that of mind and body. This world, rightly ruled, will have a beneficent effect on the greater world around us. Perfect dominion and control of this world of ours can never ensue so long so we picture in mind things that are contrary to our knowledge of good. We should bring every thought into subjection so that each one shall be pure, bright, and uplifting. The mind that pictures to itself sin, sickness, and disease must continue to dwell in these states, and the body will be fashioned after the mind. The Christ gospel is the proclaiming of glad tidings, and we should carry glad tidings with us. Our every thought should be fashioned by the love, the hope, and the faith of life. We should rise above contradictory states of being, above the discord and unrest of material consciousness. What we wish to be or to do in this world, we must get clearly imaged in mind. Whenever we want to impress anything on other minds, we must have that picture clear and distinct in our own. And in order to make it effectual, we must hold it before our mental vision so that the picture becomes virtually a part of us. By this method, we get the true action of will to make effectual the thought we have idealized. Everything that man makes is thought into existence, and the more the imaging faculty is developed, the more expression we find in the outer world. We see it expressed in more abundant statuary, paintings, and books, in public buildings, gardens, parks, and dwellings. Everything that man fashions or gives expression to in the outer world is first imaged in mind, and according to the image will be the expression. And it is so with our thoughts on all the matters of life. Harmony of thought and strength of purpose will and must find their expression in strength of body and perfection of form. The next section is how we make our environment. In connection with the imaging faculty, we should consider environment and its effects on the life of man. The world is just what we make it. Heaven would come to us here and now if we would become truly related to our environment. To illustrate my meaning, let me relate an incident that occurred some years ago. I was one of a number of persons that were seated in a large, pleasant room. Pictures of merit were on the walls, and beautiful bric-a-brac was displayed in an artistic manner about the place, the whole giving an air of comfort, if not luxury. Outdoors, the autumn winds played havoc with the leaves, and at intervals the rain fell in torrents. A lady was seated at one of the windows, looking out on the scene, a frown darkening an otherwise pretty face. While she sat there, another lady entered the room. This visitor had been out in the storm, and the rain was dripping from her garments, but her face was bright and happy. The lady who had been sitting near the window arose and greeted her, remarking, "What a horrible day it is to be out in, nothing but rain, wind, and black clouds." The other replied, "Why, my dear, the sun has been shining all day. At least I have thought it was." After a few minutes' conversation, she went out once more in the storm, tranquil and happy, while the other lady turned to one of the company, remarking, I think Mrs. Blank has gone crazy since she's taken up mental science. The absurdity of her saying that the sun had been shining all day, and such a miserable day as this has been too. One of these ladies had been in a bright, cheerful room without any so-called physical discomfort. The other had been out in rain and wind. Which of the two was crazy? I leave that for the reader to decide, but there can be no question as to which was getting the more happiness out of life. After all, the heaven within shapes the heaven without. Beauty of thought relates itself to things beautiful in the outer world, and refuses to see the discordant side of life. Inner harmony recognizes the outer harmony. To the pure, all things are pure. People are continually finding fault with their environment and feeling that in some way they are not getting their just dues, when they are actually reaping the fruit of the seed they themselves have sown. As we are going to try to view all sides of our subject, let us begin with the physical. We live in a country where there are extremes of heat and cold, where one season follows another in quick succession, where summer's luxurious foliage disappears before the blasts of coming winter, and the grassy meadow is soon hidden by the snow. Each season, however, seems necessary in the grand economy of nature. Each has its own peculiar beauty and pleasure. It is characteristic of human nature that one person will love the springtime best of all the seasons, while another rejoices in summer. Another finds the autumn most suited to his pleasures and needs, while still others think they get most out of winter. If one person could combine within himself these varying valuations of the different seasons, or could learn to adapt himself to the different changes of climate, etc., greater happiness of mind and uniformity of satisfaction throughout the year would result. When we recognize the many likes and dislikes regarding these things, we are led to ask, are different conditions and feelings the results of the seasons? Or are they due to the way in which people relate themselves to the seasons? Persons that believe only in the material side of life will say that constitution is at the bottom of the matter, and that a delicate constitution will thrive better in one season than in another. Just here we might ask, what makes a constitution delicate or otherwise? We will not stop to discuss this question now, but will say that we must look to man's mental conditions rather than the physical to find the reasons for a weak and delicate or a strong and robust constitution. One thing to be observed in the study of environment is that anything man fears possesses for him a certain amount of evil. He looks on things as good or evil, as they seem to affect his own life for one or the other condition. If he believes that through dampness, drought, or sudden change of temperature he has taken cold or has some other physical ailment, then these things fill his mind with fear and are regarded by him as evil. It is the mental conception that makes the thing good or bad, and the evil thing has always a bad effect on the body, while the good thing has always the opposite effect. It is easy to see then, in the light of this, the reason for the expression, what is one man's food is another man's poison. At certain times we go out in the cold air and feel very chilly. Again, when it is much colder, the weather seems to have no effect upon us. In summer there are times when we feel the heat much more than at others. The fact is that when the mind is in a state of poise, we offer greater resistance to heat and cold. A mind that is at peace with itself will offer far greater resistance to sickness and disease of all kinds than one that is filled with discord. The mental attitude we should assume then, in order to get in tune with our physical surroundings, would seem to be as follows. First, all the seasons are necessary, and whatever is necessary must be good. Again, allow the mind to dwell on the beauty and grandeur of nature in all her moods, in sunshine and cloud, in calm and storm. Feel that you are at one with all, that the power that brought you into existence is making itself manifest in all. In other words, become one with the whole force of life, and realize that all things are working together for good. Rejoice in the sunshine and in the storm. The same energy acts in both. God as truly covers the earth with snow as with grass. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. All we see about us in the material world are God's words molded into visible forms. And if we would only become truly related to these forms, they would all serve to strengthen us. The wrong thoughts we image in mind, which relate us to environment in the false way, are the things that tend to weaken our bodies and to fill our minds with fear and unrest. We should try to see the bright and the true side of things in the outer world, and should cease grumbling about the weather. It only makes it seem worse when we take that course. Let us make life happier and better worth the living by pointing out the good that comes from what heretofore we have looked upon as evil. We thus shall make a new environment for ourselves in this wondrously beautiful world we live in. Secondly, the way we become related to people is a question to which we may have given little, if any, thought. But on the true relationship of life depends all that is here worth having. The world about us takes on brightness or gloom precisely as we are related in the true or false way to life. The thoughts we think and the habits formed through thought processes are the causes that operate for freedom or bondage. Through unreal mental pictures, the false imaginings of life, we are building about us walls that shut out all natural light and freedom. And having shut ourselves in, we complain of our environment when, with the assistance of the people with whom we have become falsely related, we have made it just what it is, or rather, what it seems to be. How then, we ask, is environment made? We make the false variety through allowing the mind to picture unreal states of existence. We become related to the weak and diseased side of life by thinking thoughts of weakness and disease for ourselves and others. Our thought reaches out and unites with such thought the world over, so that all the weak and diseased people on the globe become our nearest relations. Our thought acts on them and theirs reacts on us. And so it all goes to swell the discordant thought of the world. Again, thoughts of poverty and want enter the mind and invariably seek their own level, and the seed planted brings its inevitable harvest of poverty and want. Or we send out the vultures of slander, malice, hate, jealousy, and revenge, hoping thereby to injure others and rejoice ourselves. But the eternal law of God stands in the way, and we are made to realize that whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. And the shame and misery we had hoped to heap on others have returned to curse our own lives. Karma acts. Well said the Master, do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Again, we allow our minds to become filled with anxious thoughts. We worry over the little things of life and become still more apprehensive over the great things. And yet we know, if we would only take time to think, that these mental states do not better our condition in any way. Indeed, they bring to us the very things we fear. For it is a fact that the things we dread are attracted to us just as surely as those we love. Thus we continue to build up an environment and become more and more discontented with the result of our labors. The hand that smites thee is thine own. Life is what we make it. If we have filled it with gloom and discord in the past, so that all the happiness and health, wholeness has departed from it, we have the power within ourselves, if we will to use it, to correct the errors of the past by forming new relationships, which shall work for righteousness and truth, creating for us in turn a new environment. Thoughts are living entities, which inevitably clothe themselves with form. Control and direction of thought are the prime requisites. Whatever you wish to be or to do, picture that ideal clearly in mind, and then will to have it take form. I will be what I will to be. We can safely take this ground when our wills are in harmony with the universal will. When we are willing the things that are good and true, when we are thinking thoughts of health and strength, of kindness and goodness, thoughts that are beautiful and harmonious, they are going forth from us to unite us with the health-giving, hopeful, courageous thought of the world. We are not only beautifying and strengthening our own lives, but are giving health and happiness to others. And the more we give, the more we shall have to give. The world about us is a great vineyard, and the thoughts we think are the seeds we plant. Every seed will bear fruit after its kind. If we sow the seed of the thorn and the thistle, we reap thorns and thistles. If we sow the seed of kind thoughts, words, and deeds, we shall reap according as we have sown. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. The next section is form and symbol. There is a tendency among the followers of the New Thought movement to renounce all allegiance to form and symbol on the ground that they act as barriers to soul development. This is true in part, yet both form and symbol are necessary and must continue to be employed for a very long time. There is a continual change going on in the human mind that necessitates new forms and new symbols to give expression to changes of thought. The symbol becomes more refined, perhaps, but for an inner condition, there must be an outer expression of some sort. We relegate old symbols to the rear when we realize their spiritual import, but we find that new ones take their places. When we learn so to discriminate between subjective states and objective forms as to see their true relation as cause and effect, we will no longer lay stress on the objective side of life. But this will not necessitate our denying the objective side altogether. Realizing the spirit, we will neither discard the letter nor be ruled by it. The forms and symbols that are necessary to one may not be to another. Therefore, it would be well to recognize the fact that each person must determine for himself the value they possess. It would be a great mistake to remove symbolism from the minds of persons that believe it to be essential to their welfare. People unfold to a knowledge of the Spirit, but until this development takes place, they must continue to get their hope and consolation from the letter. It is never profitable or wise to take away anything without giving something better in return. Therefore, it is not well to undermine the belief in form and symbolism of one who has not attained to a knowledge of spiritual things. This subject is of such vast proportions that it is not possible to treat it satisfactorily in the limited space at my disposal. I shall refer only briefly, then, to certain of the great symbols adhered to by the great body of Christians, and to their occult meanings as set forth by those who have made an esoteric study of symbolism. The Swiss have a saying that speech is silver, silence is golden. The sage of Chelsea said, "In a symbol there is concealment, and yet revelation." Here, therefore, by silence and speech acting together comes a double significance, and if the speech be high and the silence fit and noble, how expressive will their union be? Thus, in many a painted device, a simple seal emblem, the commonest truth is proclaimed with new emphasis. In the symbol proper, there is always, more or less distinctly and directly, some embodiment and revelation of the infinite. The infinite is made to blend itself with the finite, to stand visible and, as it were, attainable there. Symbolism must be viewed from two standpoints, namely the esoteric and the exoteric. An artist wishes to depict on canvas some lofty ideal that he has conceived in mind. The ideal may be love, faith, hope, or all three. He selects the human form and seeks to portray his ideal through it. In this, he succeeds to his own satisfaction. Now, this picture will always mean more to him than to a person that perceives only a beautiful form. Again, he wishes to depict strength, sublimity, and grandeur, and he paints a mountain whose top towers far beyond the clouds. His picture will always be associated with the ideal he had in mind when he painted it. Another person, viewing it, might see only a lofty mountain and the accompanying effects of clouds and sky, of light and shade. Now, in both these cases, the pictures are symbols, but how differently they are viewed. In one case, we get the inner meaning. In the other, we perceive only the outer form. Therefore, it becomes necessary, in order that we shall arrive at a knowledge of truth, to have the inner knowledge of the symbol made plain. Again, we are to look at symbols from another point of view. No matter how sacred a symbol may have been at a certain stage in human development, it loses its power when man has acquired a thorough comprehension of its significance and has risen above its need, or when it has been replaced by a still higher symbol. For every symbol is but the garment of an ideal. Symbols are the clothing of thought, and thought is continually shaping for itself new clothing. Old forms pass away and are replaced by new, but the persistency with which we cling to all form is a remarkable trait in the human character. Carlyle says, "The law of perseverance is among the deepest in man. By nature he hates change. Seldom will he quit his old house till it has actually fallen about his ears. Thus have I seen solemnities linger as ceremonies, sacred symbols as idle pageants, to the extent of 300 years and more after all life and sacredness had evaporated out of them." At all times in the history of the planet, there have been those who were possessed of deeper spiritual insight than the masses of the world, and it has ever been their desire to transmit the knowledge of which they were possessed to future generations. And almost invariably, they have sought to do this through symbolic signs. They knew the significance back of the sign, but the masses have believed in and worshipped the symbols themselves, i.e., have lived in the letter and missed the spirit. When we live to the spirit, we die to the letter. When we are alive to the letter, we are dead to the spirit. Perhaps one of the earliest of religious symbols was that of the cross. The cross of Osiris was one of the most sacred symbols of the ancient Egyptians. It was an indispensable emblem in all religious ceremonial. It meant the pathway to eternal life, the emblem of eternal hope, the mystery of life and death. It also meant the union between man and God. It is said that the early Spanish conquerors in Central and South America were astonished to find the cross an object of religious veneration among the natives. What meaning they attached to it, however, is unknown. Among the Romans, its office was a degrading one. Death on the cross was held to be so dishonorable that only slaves and malefactors of the lowest class were subjected to it. In the Christian era, all this was changed, and the cross again became an object of veneration and worship. The esoteric meaning is as follows. The 4 points make 4 angles, dividing the circle into 4 equal parts. The cross thus portrays a perfect union, balance, equality, and at one-ment or atonement on all four planes: the phenomenal, intellectual, psychical, and celestial or spiritual. The mystery of the crucifixion is explained as follows, from four different points of view. First, to the natural and actual sense, typifying the crucifixion of the man of God by the world. Secondly, to the intellectual and philosophic sense, typifying the crucifixion in man of the lower nature. Thirdly, to the personal and sacrificial sense, symbolizing the passion and oblation of the Redeemer. And fourthly, to the celestial and creative sense, representing the oblation of God to the universe. To the crucified, regenerate man, having made at-one-ment throughout his own dual and fourfold nature, this crucifixion is the death of the animal body, the rending of the veil of the flesh, the union of the will of man with that of God, the coming into accord with the absolute law of love. It is sometimes called the reconciliation, which is but another name for the at-one-ment. The serpent has ever been the symbol of wisdom. It is also the symbol of man's lower nature. The fiery serpent that destroyed the children of Israel in the wilderness symbolizes earthly wisdom, or wisdom acquired through the objective senses, while the serpent that Moses lifted up in the wilderness symbolizes the higher wisdom, which gives life. In the light of this, we can more readily understand the saying of Jesus, "As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up." The serpent, with its tail in its mouth, signifies eternity, neither beginning nor end. The symbol of baptism by water is purification, and was used many hundreds of years before John the Baptist. The communion that is celebrated in Christian churches is the intercourse of soul with soul. The body, or bread, of which all must partake, corresponds to the Word of God. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. The wine is the divine will, the life of God, the love that is to become active within the soul of man. Unless we partake of this bread and wine, we can have no realizing sense of the at-one-ment. We can have no knowledge of man's sonship to God. In the world, there are two classes of minds, both seeking a knowledge of the truth. One strives to attain or unfold to truth, the other to acquire it. The one that seeks to attain to it looks from within outward. The one that seeks to acquire it looks from without inward. He that seeks to acquire truth relies largely on the reasoning faculties of mind, while he that seeks to attain to it relies on the intuitive or spiritual faculties of the soul. One gets the knowledge that comes through objective channels, the other draws direct from the subjective source. The objective deals with forms and symbols, working from form to the something that lies beyond. He that lives in the subjective arrives at the true nature of things and sees them in their true relation, knowing the subjective to be cause and the objective effect. He sees from cause to effect, instead of reasoning from effect to cause. The only reality a symbol possesses is the invisible thought that calls it into existence. Then let us try truly to distinguish between the form and the power that animates it. The letter fails and systems fall, and every symbol wanes. The spirit overbroading all, eternal love remains.